You're listening to another episode of Open Source CXO, the podcast designed to share insights on how to excel in your business using technology, regardless of the industry. Host Robert Kehoe is a self-taught software developer who has grown to the role of CEO. Renowned for his collaborations with organizations such as Stanford University, Nelnet, and Louis Vuitton, he continually seeks new challenges to conquer in the world of tech. Accompanying him is Don Blackburn, a veteran COO with over 25 years of experience in cultivating diverse relationships and driving innovation in various technical projects. Each week, they'll be sitting down with some of the nation's foremost technology leaders to develop an open source playbook, drawing from their firsthand experiences in the field. Let's talk some tech.
All right, today we're joined by Phil Merrell, who's CIO of PromptCare Companies. Phil, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, currently, as stated, I'm the CIO for PromptCare Companies. The PromptCare Companies is a healthcare services organization that focuses on treating chronically ill, both in respiratory services and home infusion and ambulatory suites, infusion centers. When you think about the three core arms, we have a specialty pharmacy that services both arms of our business, ventilated, non-ventilated patients, ALS type patients, things along those lines. When you think of our infusion services, specialty infusions around things like arthritic, when you think of immunology, gastroenterology, in some cases, we also treat bleeding disorders, so rare diseases like hemophilia and things along those lines.
Wow.
We do them in the home. We have suites, and we have an infusion center as well.
Are you guys publicly? I thought you guys were publicly traded. Is that incorrect?
No, that is
Okay.
incorrect. We are
Okay.
not publicly. We are backed by a private equity organization, a fantastic organization out of Chicago. We are a national organization. We have presence in 39 states today, and we cover coast to coast.
Gotcha.
And most of the IT department, I think, is out east, isn't it?
Actually, we're split 50-50. I sit here in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
I have half of the team here in Kansas and half of the team out in New Providence, New Jersey. The main corporate headquarters for the overarching company is New Providence, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I have one resource that sits out in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania.
Gotcha. How big is your team?
Oh, we have a small team. My team right now today is 11, 12 people strong. So
Okay.
we're actually quite small,
Mm-hmm.
but
Gotcha.
mighty. We get a lot.
Yeah.
Smaller than some of my previous backgrounds. I've been in healthcare now for a little more than let's see. I got into healthcare in 2001. So what is that, 22? Going on 20, January of 2001.
Yeah.
So 22, 23 years.
Wow.
Been a CIO.
Me too, man. We're all getting old.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very exciting. How's that?
Time flies.
Yeah.
What's the makeup of your team? Is it developers? Is it what sort of resources do you have access to?
Some end user support folks. I have about 4 of those that I really focus on. Our nurses, our respiratory therapists, and the clinical team at whole, and then the supporting of the pharmacy. I've got 2, 4, 5 engineers. And one director that functions like an architect as well.
What's that tech stack then for your engineers and whatnot? Out of curiosity.
We focus heavily in a .NET Windows type environment. I try to keep it simple, looking for the most simple approach for our end user community.
That's right.
We do. I have, since I've taken off, been in this role for about 3.5 years. So I try to drive the organization more towards cloud-based solutions. Of course,
Azure, I imagine.
Yeah, all
Okay.
Azure at this point in time. And then just from a usability, a business support, growth, I'm real careful on where I go with the build approach. I do have a full stack engineer and 2 data engineers that can both double, or all 3 of them can back each other up. So in certain situations, I do develop where I need to, but I try to minimize that because
Use something off the shelf then? Is that?
I try to go COTS off the shelf and then look at where I can do integrations.
Gotcha.
In some cases, we do have some custom software that we built ground up. The other things that I've used and that I currently use are platform-based capabilities, so like an Appian, a low-code, no-code platform. We build capabilities on top of that platform, and then allows us to scale the business.
Do you guys do that? Because at least from a off-the-shelf perspective, I know that HIPAA and there's a lot of compliances with GDPR and some of the even California laws and different privacy stuff. Does that help with some of that to sort of offset that liability? Is that why
It
you guys
does,
take
because
that approach?
there's a lot of things that you get. So the thought that I put into this is I could spend significant amount of money in building from the ground up, and building all the controls and all the stability and all of the functions I need to meet some of the requirements of HIPAA, of various state regulations. So I tell folks, if you've seen one state HHS, you've only seen one state HHS, right? So to go across the 39 states and meet all that compliance, I could spend a significant amount of money to do that and build it from the ground up. And I have a tool that's tailor built to me specifically. Or I could leverage a partner that has a platform that they've poured millions of dollars into, that I can just piggyback on top of, and do a small investment and get a large impact.
And these platforms, you mentioned, a custom system is obviously tailored to you guys, but these other systems that they've invested this money into, do those handle your needs pretty well out of the box, or do you have to do a lot of customization?
When we look at systems like that, we're talking like Snowflake and systems, that are really kind of got some versatility to them. They drive a configuration first type model. The other thing I look at is I look at the alignment to the business need, right? So one of the things that I do is I go in for a solution. I look at what's the business outcome we're trying to go. I avoid the shiny object syndrome, the SOS, right?
It's hard, especially for developers. We love those shiny objects.
Well, and I myself being an engineer by training, right? My world is all about, what can I build today?
Right.
But you don't want to necessarily get into that model as a CIO, because it opens up the organization to risk. It also, you have to look at the culture that you move within. And one aspect of the culture when I look at these solutions to try and determine which path we need to go is adaptability, right?
Yep.
Because it's one thing to have nurses. What I love about nurses and respiratory therapists is that they all say they're not technical, but yet when you watch what they do, you're kind of like, oh my God, that's
give me a break.
technical. Yeah, someone's lying here, right? But at the same time, they're looking at when you get them out in the field and they're dealing with patient care and patient services, right? And then you throw in a complex technology that they got to learn. You got to do this. You got to go here. You got to press this. You got to pull this down. And you got to put this in, or this is going to come this way. Then it becomes overwhelming because they're focused on a human life in front of them, and I'm asking them to flow through a tech. So I got to keep it simple.
Yeah.
I got to keep it easy. Got to keep it adaptable and adoptable.
Seeing that, I've actually heard that very same thing from other, we work with some what do you call it, medical-based companies, so healthcare is what I meant to say. So they've said the very same thing, when you got lives on the line and your tech breaks, that's, I totally understand that. So I guess what are some of is there any specific challenges there, I guess you had seen, just your time doing that? Like, I guess I'm trying to formulate my question properly. Don't worry, he's going to edit some of this stuff out here. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So take your time. It's no big deal. But I'm just curious if there's any specific scenario you've gone through or you've had, or any kind of experience that sort of made you kind of take that approach with finding, I guess, how do you keep it simple? What methods? Is there anything that any experiences you've had in the past that have driven you this way, or maybe you didn't keep it simple before and it's caused any sort of headaches, or hopefully no major issues, like somebody's personal injury or anything. So is there anything like that, any kind of personal experience that has made you kind of make sure that keeping it simple is absolutely the way to go? I'm just curious about any experience there at all, or any stories.
Yeah, so I'll share one. It's a little personal. And
only if you're willing.
No, I will. I think it's because it's truly the foundation of what kind of, and I think it's probably going to shock some people to hear kind of. So as an engineer, tomorrow will be 26 years ago, my daughter was born, right? Her birthday's tomorrow. She's a special needs individual. So 26 years old, she functions like an 8-year-old, right? In some cases, as little as a 6-year-old, right? And so it's quite challenging for us. And many, many years ago, as an engineer, she had to have a surgery, and it was an emergent surgery. And I found myself, prior to being in healthcare, I wasn't in healthcare yet. And I was fresh out of the military, was in my first IT job, and there my daughter was about to go into the operating room. And the surgery was supposed to take 6 hours, and they came out almost 11 hours later.
Oh, geez.
Right? And once it came out, I had the doctor come out and talking to us, and he was explaining to us some of the things that went on. And what had happened was there was a disruption in the operating room. And it was a tech system that they had deployed
Oh my.
that would monitor all the vitals and everything else, and the back end went down.
Wow.
And of course, they had a secondary operating room on the ready. And my thought was, and the question I asked the doc was like, why a secondary, like a whole other operating room?
Yeah.
Why? He's like, well, we have to have the redundancy, we have to have all of this, and sometimes when these systems come down, we're in the operating room, we don't know how to necessarily troubleshoot right there to get it back quickly, so we just shift rooms, right?
That's
So I
incredible.
was like,
wow.
thank God, that's amazing,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it's not,
No. No,
right?
it's-
Because as engineers, we know if you're in the middle of an operation, I don't want that nurse. If I'm the guy on the table, I don't want that nurse going, oh my God, I don't know what to do here,
Right.
right?
Yep.
It's got to be quick. Press this button. If it doesn't respond, flip this switch and you're done,
Back
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
right? It's online. Oh, by the way, if that doesn't work, don't worry. It'll come back in 2 seconds, right?
Right.
And so thinking about that and putting yourself in those shoes, and thank God they had that because my daughter wouldn't be here today, right? I walked away and I spent a lot of time stuck on that concept. And then I just adopted the idea that KISS was my friend,
Yeah.
right? And the idea is to keep it simple. Just keep it as simple as you possibly can so that when your end users are in dire straits and the tech fails, they have a quick way
Right.
to
Back
deal
up.
with it,
Right.
right? And so that's really kind of the approach. Simplicity, 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 ease of adoptability. Now, it's not always that way.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And that becomes the hard part.
I'm a little surprised they even admitted that to you. In this age of litigation.
Well, there was a connection I had with the surgeon in question.
Okay.
Right. There's a family relationship there.
Otherwise, you may never have known.
No, we would not
Well,
have known.
you did mention that was 20-ish, 26 years ago. I think.
26 years ago.
So how do you think? Do you think that's different now? Do you think?
Oh, I know
you-
it's different now.
Is it different
Yeah.
now? Okay,
Yeah.
so I would
Yeah.
love to hear about, because everybody's probably curious about how AI or how natural language processing, things like that, kind of, they make an appearance in this industry. I'm curious what you think has been done since then to sort of remedy those issues.
Technology's it is innovated and evolved so much. One of the things that we all, and you guys know this already, every 3 years, right, technology goes through some level of an evolution, right? If you think about back in the day, 26 years ago, you could have a server go down, and the concept of failover and disaster recovery or high availability, even with high availability 26 years ago, it wasn't true high availability.
Right.
It was what I would call fault tolerant, right? And so, but today, you've got systems, I've got systems in my ecosystem that I can have a server actually disrupt and go down. And I get a message that comes in, I got a team that responds, and I'll call the head of clinical operations. I'll be like, hey, are you guys having any issues right now? Are you seeing anything? They're like, no, why, something going on? I'm like, no. Nothing's happening here. Nothing to see behind the curtain. We're good
Just
to go.
checking.
And we hang up, and lo and behold, we actually lost an entire device that supports the clinical EMR, but it went on without a hiccup, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty impressive
It
in
is.
26 years.
Yep.
And it's the advancement. It's the advancement of the whole stack. We've got companies like Microsoft and IBM and HP and Dell that are working double time. You've got and the mergers and the acquisitions as they start to become more conglomerate. A lot of times we look at them and go, "Oh my gosh, it's going to get expensive, going to go through." But innovation happens, right? They start to solve problems because now Dell, one of the things I love about it is I got to see inside the sauce one day of how they were looking at some of the acquisitions they did, and they realized themselves it didn't work together. Now they got a whole team of engineers going, how do we make it work together? And ultimately, when I built my first private cloud, it was beautiful. It worked, right? Because Dell solved a problem that we were having because they had acquired one of the parts that we were working with, right? So I think it's evolved significantly. You look at some of the technologies that are out there today. I look at some of these developers.
They got it so easy, man.
Oh my God,
they got
do they have
Dude,
it so
I started
easy.
over 20 years ago myself, and I had to learn PHP without Stack Overflow, and now developers have it easy.
I had to write
Little
code and
babies.
worry about garbage I was leaving places.
Yep.
Today they're all like, "What do you mean?"
I don't even know what garbage is anymore.
Yeah,
man.
I know. I got two software engineers that are my boys. My two older boys are software engineers, and I look at the stuff they do today, and I'm like, you guys have, they'll get to a problem, they'll be like, oh, I got to go look for this, right? Understand? I'm like, well, did you look inside this object? He's like, why would I do that? Well, you got to look at how this. I could probably tell you where it's plugged. He goes, no, I'm just going to go pull this from over here. I'm going to go out to Reddit.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's absurd.
Man,
The
you guys are
resources.
lazy.
There's a million resources.
I learned off documentation. That was difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in trial and error, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Hundreds and thousands of lines of code,
Yep.
That you had to comb through and figure out. Now today, I mean, they get functioning apps off of 10 lines of code.
Yep.
And I'm like,
It's unbelievable. The
all right, this
frameworks
is
they have.
amazing. Right.
I remember so it's PHP, and I was trying to get just a date to format, and I didn't realize that you can change one of the letters from uppercase to lowercase to get to a different format. And I figured that out just by happenstance, and I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. So it's that kind of crap. Nobody knows anymore. It's crazy. But no, I agree. Developers have it way easy. So that does sort of bring me. So how does the EMR sort of? I know that's hit. We still have to talk about sort of compliance and HIPAA and EMR. You guys try to keep it simple. You utilize solutions that are off the shelf. How does that play into the compliances? You mentioned you do some custom software, but if you offload that, that liability, what have you typically had to worry about when it comes to complying with standards, encrypting data, all that kind of.
Yeah. So even though we buy, an EMR that comes off the shelf, and we don't use the traditional, like we're not an Epic, we're not a Cerner. We actually leverage local WellSky.
Okay.
And in our industry, in our space, specifically in the home infusion, in our respiratory side, we leverage Brightree. On our infusion side, we leverage WellSky, right? Even though you offload and they have millions of dollars, they have all the same regulatory requirements that they have to comply with, and it's incumbent upon them to assist us ensure that in the use of the software, that it has the controls to help keep us as compliant as we possibly can, right? But it still doesn't.
And is that specifically from a human perspective then? Obviously, they have the data under control. Things are encrypted or stored.
I wouldn't say they always have. Well, I mean, they have the data under control, yes.
Okay.
Right? I don't want to necessarily give a misleading guidance around, but it's still incumbent upon me to ensure that the controls and everything are in place, because you have leakage, you have human error, you have so many factors that come into how data can actually leave your system and get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Especially from a HIPAA perspective. That's the number one concern, is actually the human element within this space, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then on top of that, making sure that the stack that you build around and that you put things onto. So, yes, we're in the cloud, right? And you think the cloud, it's one of the things you have to remember is, like Azure is responsible for security of the cloud. I'm still responsible for security in the cloud.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right? And so, and then ensuring that we have the compliance, that the processes and the users are adhering to processes, that we have the right controls, the role-based access controls. Do we have, from an access model, do we have the right level of gates that they have to get through to ensure that we know that Phil Merrell is logging in and it is Phil Merrell and not someone else, right? And so it doesn't alleviate us. All it does is give us maybe a step forward as the partners, like in this case, WellSky is a really strong partner for us. Brightree's a strong partner as well, but WellSky's really stepped up a lot over the last couple of years with us, and they've been a really strong partner for us to ensure that the processes we have and the controls that we have in place allow me to focus on getting around the perimeter, and that once you're in the system, I have a traceability and the ability to kind of steer the users where they need to be and get more of a comfort level that what we're doing meets the compliance standards. So it doesn't take it away, but it does make it a little bit better, if that makes sense.
It does.
And you have I think you said you have a CISO or Chief Information Security Officer, right?
That's me.
Oh, you wear that hat too?
I wear that hat
okay.
as well, yes.
That's,
Yeah.
and then do you have people that are specializing in that? That just
I
security
have my
professionals?
architect and then we have other partners. Like I have an MSP infrastructure partner that has a security arm to it that I leverage as well. So in the event that something's occurring, we leverage the cavern out here, shared data center. We have our own private network setups and everything else. But I do have resources that when things do occur, and in my security model, I go from an outside in, right? So from the perimeter all the way through down to the end user and how they interact with the systems. I have layers of security in place there today that I can guarantee you could literally give your username and password away and you still can't get into my network.
Is that a challenge?
Absolutely.
Get us a laptop.
So
Let's
do you
go.
guys, okay, so you leverage a third-party kind of security partner is what it sounds like. So do you guys go through any sort of, penetration testing? Is there any requirements for quarterly or?
So I have, there are requirements. We have accreditations that we have in healthcare.
And you're required to uphold those accreditations by
by the payers,
Okay.
by the payers, by CMS in some cases.
Okay.
All right, and so in order for us to be able to service and actually be able to submit claims and collect and recover revenue from the services we provide, payment for the services that we provide, we have to have these accreditations.
Gotcha.
And we have to be compliant to some of these standards. And so just to clear up a few things, from the managed services partner, they handle infrastructure, they have an arm that will do security, but I set the strategy, I set the plan, I pick all the technologies, and I actually guide them through kind of where the configurations go. In some cases, I use my internal team to do the configurations. So we have partners like Arctic Wolf on our perimeter, which is an XDR, MDR, managed detection response type capabilities. SentinelOne, we do multi-factor authentication at multiple layers. So not only do you use your username and password on your laptop to get onto your laptop, but you have an MFA token that has to come to your phone.
Yep.
The cool part is I have a piece of software I run that you can get that token on your phone, but your phone's ID, device ID, has to match what we have on record. Otherwise, that token's useless to you.
Okay, I have an interesting question there then. I didn't mean to segue into this, but now that you brought it up. So Apple makes that a little bit hard. They have historically, originally when Apple kind of released the iPhone, they had a general unique identifier for the phone, but they got away from that because it was exploited by advertisers.
Right.
So how do you guys deal with that now? I know that you could still get a unique ID from the phone, but I believe it is app specific. So do you guys have some way of handling that, or does that not apply in this situation?
In this situation, we have the MEID that's registered with that phone.
Oh, okay.
And that's what comes across to us. And we look at that ID,
Okay.
right, for that specific device.
I didn't even know you were able to grab that information. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's registered in our
So
system.
in addition, so you use one of those apps that basically send that you get a code for 30 seconds. It's available but it has to match that identifier. That's interesting.
Which is frustrating for most of the users, but
Well, there's
it's
some apps.
necessary.
Some apps make that really easy. You
Some
click
of
a
the
button.
users, right, they
Yeah.
do get frustrated with this.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've had users that have experienced theft, right? That have
It's all for their protection. Yeah.
and it's literally there for their protection. Here's the thing I will tell you, from a security model and a security perspective, it's not if you're going to be breached, it's when you're going to be breached. And the approach that you have to take, at least I take as a CISO, is when the breach occurs, here's where I want it to go, and here's how I want it to play out, right?
How do those breaches typically happen then? Do they? I'd imagine anymore it's difficult, and I think I actually said this to someone recently, but it's difficult to penetrate software. Everything's, we've done a really good job at locking certain things down. Of course, there's always, security holes in various things that we find and we fix, but it's the common element among attacks that I've seen is that human element. It's so much easier to attack people anymore.
Somebody brings in another.
And is that the case here? Like, what are the most?
Yeah, I will tell you, it is the largest threat is the human effect, right? And in some cases, yes, you have, and I will tell you, the advent of AI, has really made it difficult. I'm noticing that Proofpoint and Barracuda, some of your email folks that are out there that do email security are struggling to keep up because the email sophistications are getting better and better and better. We're starting to see more and more email hacks come through. And those are some of the most dangerous because imagine
like phishing scams, is that?
The phishing scam. So imagine my email gets hacked at my corporation because someone clicked a link or submitted something through or whatever, right? Now you get an email from me. You and I have been talking about a proposal. We've been talking about doing some business, and all of a sudden you get an email from Phil Merrell, and it says, hey, Don, I need you to click this link here to get to the new version of the proposal. Well, we've been talking about this. Right? So it makes total sense. You click it, and it says, hey, give me your username and password because we got to make sure that you are who you are. And you just pound it away,
right?
And you submit that through.
And knowing Don, this would be absolutely something he'd do.
No, I got one of those emails just literally the other day and it came from one of our software leads. And I get an email from him. I go, well, that's weird. He usually slacks me, right? And sends an email, and I did not open the attachment.
Well, apparently I've been sending emails as well requesting gift cards.
Yeah.
So.
That's a huge one. And the funny thing is, so here's one. We had one come through the other day that I thought was pretty interesting. And we've been great with our employees. I do extensive training with the employees. We have a continuous, micro training, the 3 or 4 minute segment videos that we get through PII Protect. That just kind of talks to them about different strategies, different approaches, and different threats that are out there and stuff. But one that came through, and we had an employee actually fish it to us, right? I have a fish button in the email so they can fish it to us. And it was beautiful. It said your OneDrive storage is almost at capacity. Please click the link log in to see about methods to remediate. So that was the message, and they're like, and it was PromptCare IT support at promptcare.com. Of course, everyone knows it's not our IT address.
Yeah.
Right.
So that right there tells them from a sender perspective, this is not legit. But the beautiful part about it was, as you look down the email and you get past that link where they say log in to check it, you'll notice right at the bottom, you're like, wait, is that the header of another email? And all you do is you move just a little bit up, and it was literally someone talking about trying to get a loan from a bank, and then they were going back and forth about the additional documents that were needed. I mean, it just had this long thread from this cyber person's whatever. I turned that over to the FBI. Wow. I was like, hey, look, this guy's, but they're so sloppy with it, but it's still effective.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? And part of the problem that I talk to my staff about is slow down. Mm-hmm. Right? We get moving so fast.
I think it's a great advice, actually.
Why didn't he slack me? Well, I don't know why, but you know what? Boom. And we're moving along.
Yeah.
Right? Just slow down. Take a breath. Right? The extra 5 seconds aren't going to hurt you.
Agreed.
Right?
That's good advice.
Pay attention.
Well, I think most organizations probably are communicating outside of email now, aren't they? I mean, we use Slack. I think a lot of people use Microsoft Teams. It's probably what you guys use.
Yep.
So your internal staff's probably doing that, but
well, and we still get them. You still get them because we deal with hemophilia centers. We deal with other doctor offices.
Sure, outside. And
they get their, they get their systems hacked. You got vendors who are working with us. We've seen one come through where we had a third-party partner got hacked because he was at a conference connected to a Wi-Fi that was spoofed. Right, so his 365 gets hacked. All of a sudden, we got another copy of an invoice saying, "Hey, this invoice hasn't been paid. Here's our new banking information. Can you please pay this $85,000 invoice?" Right, and our finance people are like, "We know we paid this."
Yeah.
right? So they fire it over to me, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't look right.
Yeah.
I reach out to the vendor, and lo and behold, he's like, oh my God, I'm hacked, right? You know, and so it happens, and it'll come through just from normal course of business. It doesn't have to necessarily be internal, but it's the savviness of our human people that really, you got to really spend the time.
So you guys train. There you go. You
Train. And our CEO is amazing with the fact that he hones in. This is a hot button for him. Your scores for security are critical, and it's how savvy is your culture.
Well, yeah, I'd imagine should be a big deal. I mean, you could face huge fines and issues. They could take down whole companies, man.
I just put out a LinkedIn post last week before, on that very topic of two companies I'm pretty close to, right? I'm one that's a client and another one that, I'm just familiar with. I know somebody that works in the organization. Those companies were really affected, like taken down, like could not do business for a period of time.
Well, the ransomwares are
they're outrageous.
One was a ransomware, and it I think they ended up paying it, just because they had to get their data back. And
that's crazy.
the FBI got involved, all kinds of stuff happened, but at the end, and these are large companies that you would think, have the necessary procedures in place to avoid that sort of thing.
You will be shocked at how many companies just kind of move around without.
And just whistle by the graveyard, hope it doesn't happen.
Dumb luck is what I call it, right?
Wow.
Not a very sound model there.
No, it isn't.
No, but I think it gets surprising. I mean, look at Experian, right? If I remember correctly, now I may be wrong, right? But if I remember correctly, I believe Experian was some gal sitting on her couch down in Texas, hacked them.
Yep.
Right?
Well, same thing with
multiple millions of records of personal financial information
and
of Americans.
They have a lot of data. So
who would you expect to be the most hardened of all of them?
Right.
Experian.
Right.
Someone sitting on their couch got right on through, right?
Yeah.
Who was the casino in Vegas was recently?
Oh, MGM.
MGM. Yeah.
And they got through through the help desk is how they got through.
And again,
that's what I'm saying. It's difficult with software anymore. How often do you guys experience somebody do DDoS attacks still? Are they still a thing? Or
they are, but I don't think they have as much as an impact as they used to have. But they still are.
Yeah, now with huge cloud data centers, now you can scale up.
Yeah.
Cloud has revolutionized things in my opinion. So I'm all about it.
Well, one of the other things that we've done to help ourselves is I look at where we do business. So for a good example, I don't do business anywhere outside the continental United States and in Alaska and Hawaii. So we geofence, block.
Yep.
Right? We block everything outside.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sucks for our employees because we'll get a senior executive or an executive that wants to go on vacation to Mexico or to
Can't access
London.
anything. Yep.
And they're all like, hey, can I get in? I'm like, nope.
Do it from home.
Yeah.
What about proxies? They could use proxies to probably get around that issue.
Well, they can,
Okay.
right? And so we monitor from traffic and we monitor behavior. So part of what I've got with Sentinel-1 is Sentinel-1's got behavioral analysis that we monitor with, right?
That's
so if all of
fancy.
a sudden, if I, and the thing is we run a couple other pieces of software where we're looking at connectivity points. So if you're constantly connecting from Leawood, Kansas or Lenexa, Kansas, and maybe once in a while you get up to Independence, Missouri, and you might travel over to St. Louis and you connect, and all of a sudden now you're connecting from Nevada. Boom, you're down.
Yep.
Right? We stop it. And then we stop you until you call.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I keep using my token, but I can't get through. Well, guess what? Are you in Nevada? I'm right in the middle of MGM. Well, stop that.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So how does, getting back to some of just the outline here, I wanted to talk, you mentioned at one point that you worked for, you came from an insurance background, and I would love to hear a little bit more about how that sort of ties into, claim submissions, like you were saying, and getting paid and getting that revenue in the door. How does all this tie into, I guess, is that the responsibility of the EMR at that point? Do you guys do that a different way? How does that part work?
No,
and that's part of that. I'm
it's
a little
all
familiar.
Yeah. There's a general practice around this on the clinical care side. It's called revenue cycle, where you get your encounters occur. The physicians or the caregivers will meet with the patient, and that becomes an encounter that ultimately becomes a claim, and then that claim gets submitted into the insurance, right? And there's there's all kinds of factors and they're pretty standard across the industry as a whole. You have to, in some cases, you have to have a prior authorization. In other cases, if it's within the benefit structure, there's copay, co-insurance you have to figure out with these patients and stuff. And so, in our cases at PromptCare, we have, in some situations, some significant numbers we're dealing with. So for some of these disease states, we've got situations where a vial of medication is, $60,000, right? And we have to have prior authorizations before we can dispense that med. And in some cases, there's a copay, right? And so with the copay, you have to talk to the patients and stuff. And then so when you go through that, you get the submission of the claim. So that process is kind of generically the same across.
Okay.
And the insurance companies that come, we're all in healthcare, right? And we have the same kind of process on the backside. They look at the benefit structure, they look at the drug, they look at the cost, they look at utilization management, they look at factors such as, site of care, right, necessity of care, reasonableness of care, where their prerequisites met, right? So on the healthcare side, on the health insurance side, you'll have usually medical directors or something that will set policy or structure around, in order for you to get, a knee replacement done, there has to be an MRI, there has to be physical therapy that's done. Before you can get the MRI, you have to go through physical therapy, right? So today when we sit in front of a doctor and the doctor's talking to us about, yeah, I think you're, for example, I had an elbow problem, right? And he goes, yeah, your elbow looks like it's going to have some trouble. Before we do the MRI, I'd like you to go through physical therapy. Right, I go through the physical therapy, elbow still busted up. He's like, all right, well, now we can get the MRI. Right? And he goes, we might have to, Phil, you got 4 tears in your elbow. And he's like, one of them we probably should operate on. But it's not a complete tear, so let's do some cortisone injections. So then we go through this process of these 3 or 4 cortisone injections. Lo and behold, the elbow heals itself. Right, so these medical directors over on the health plan side said, we want all these steps met before you operate, right? And it's around cost containment. Now, from a health plan perspective, they're around making sure that the necessity of care is met and that it's all there. On the provider side, they're trying to get you to the best place possible. In our case, we follow that same structural model, right? We submit the claims, we make sure the prior authorization is in place before we administer care. We have all this upfront work for patients' admissions and onboarding to make sure that we can give the care to the patient adequately and efficiently in a timely manner. And then ultimately because we've got to get reimbursed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, we need the reimbursement to keep operating and providing the critical care to these patients that are most needed because these are chronic conditions, right? And so did that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, no, it did. I'm just curious at this point. So if somebody has a particular issue, is there it could be anything, but is there a very specific step-by-step procedure, or is that defined by the doctor and the system just has to take any and all information and that is human intervention there to see, okay, well, they've got that vial of medicine or they got that cortisone shot and they need to get reimbursed for those things. Like, is that a very, ad hoc style of going back and forth between the system and the caregiver, or is that something that's very defined? Like, whenever
that's a hard one to answer because in some situations, I think, you have clinical pathways, right? So number one, I'm not a doctor, right? So just to be clear about it, I'm not a doctor, right?
Really not.
But you have clinical pathways that these doctors work within, right? That have kind of a structured. Here's how we do things, right? And here's what the general population of medical practice says, or how we treat certain conditions, or we go after certain situations with a patient. But each encounter is unique in some regard. Well, from a population perspective, 40, 50, 51-year-old male with diabetes, having a heart, chest discomfort, there's a clinical pathway that says ER, run an EKG, do X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. There's a structure. But now you get Phil Merrell in there, 51-year-old diabetic, had a heart attack, had a pulmonary embolism. Now, what do we do with him? Right. We deviate from the pathway, and there might be a pathway that deviates and says, all right, here's what we do in this scenario, right? And then in other situations, maybe they have a pediatric situation where the disease state is so unique that they really haven't figured out a cure or a treatment model for children. But yet you can't leave this. You can't just say, "Oh, go home. We got nothing for you," right? So you try things, and so that may be where the doctor is kind of working with known pathways to make adjustments and to be able to treat. In those situations, we work in tandem with the provider because we've got, in our case, we get a referral from a physician, right? That, so we might have a doctor at KU Med that's got a myasthenia gravis patient, and they're referring that patient to us, to neurological situation, right? And so we get that, and the doctor says, I want this patient to have X, Y, or Z at this interval, this dosage, and we go into the insurance and we say, all right, we got this patient. Are they covered? Yes. What do we need for prior authorization? And the insurance says, here's what your reimbursement model looks like. We look at that. We look at our cost to actually execute. Then we look at the delta. We talk to the patient about, what their responsibilities may be. And then if everything works out beautifully, we schedule the patient in for the actual infusion, either in the home, in the suite, or in our center. And then we execute on that. And then we do the submission and go from there. So that's the general path that everything works within. And the claims, they all go in, and in some cases we use clearinghouses and third-party partners to do the batch submission of the claims.
Oh, okay.
And batch recovery.
Well, I'm sure those insurance companies want very specific.
There's a structure. There's a defined, like we have EDI, electronic data interchange. The definitions.
Right.
There's X12 standards out there for HIPAA compliant claims, right? That get submitted.
And I'd imagine that AI in this context would, at least if it's not now, it might play kind of a big role in defining what was the term you used, that a patient, or a healthcare provider would follow, a treatment path.
Yeah,
but it would also be conditional. It's like, hey, well, if this and this, then this should be. Does AI currently play a role, or machine learning in general, just play a role in some of that? Or
I think from a broad healthcare perspective, somewhere in some corner, the answer is yes.
Yeah, but it's
right?
not.
It's not a mainstream.
Do you see that being a mainstream sort of ordeal? Because I would imagine that would be where machine learning would excel.
So here's the thing with technology and some of these new ideas and these new innovations, right? AI, machine learning, they all came out many. Remember the advent of cloud, right? We used to have the argument of, why would you go to the cloud? The cloud's just a bunch of infrastructure in a box somewhere, right? Right. And we fought the cloud, and it took, 5-10 years for the cloud to really start to get its foot down on the ground and really start adoption to today. If I sat here in front of you and said, we're going to build a data center, I'm going to acquire all my servers, you'd be like, why? Why aren't you going to the cloud?
So why would you waste
So the conversation shifted. So for me to sit here and say AI, machine learning, they do have a big play in healthcare, right? And they are making large inroads in healthcare, and they're used heavily. I have used machine learning and artificial intelligence and other roles within healthcare.
With success, have you been? How do you feel those have worked?
Define success, right? Do we want to say, because there's the thing that people have to look at is this is an evolutionary experience, right? The way I describe it, like, today we're looking at robotic process automation currently at PromptCare and RPA, and it's designed to help us in more back-end operations and things like that, right? But when we deploy the bots are pretty simple things. They don't know what they don't know, right? I don't have machine learning deployed yet to feed them, right, to get them to gain knowledge. So I would say I had success in the past with machine learning, ultimately establishing neural networks and getting AI up and functional where we can do things with them. But they were all back office operation. They weren't directly in line with the care of patients, right? And I know there are advances in other companies that have, in clinical settings, that have leveraged AI to assist clinical staff in doing things. And those are continuing to evolve and grow. There are large health systems that I'm not going to name, but I do know leverage AI for reading images, especially in the oncology space. Yeah. Right? And the AI will make predictions or determine a clinical pathway, and then the oncologist will review that. In some cases, they have agreement. In other cases, They may decide out of compassion or empathy to take a different path, of course, right? Because here's the example I give with the AI. Looking at a cancer, the AI might look at 2 images and say, image 1, this patient has a 90% success rate, so do everything we can to save this patient. Patient 2 has a 30% success rate, do nothing, allow a patient to just the best care. Patient 1 is 98 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Patient 2 is 6.
Yeah.
Who gets the treatment?
So there's still human intervention, though, right?
There has to be human intervention, right? Because the machines only know what the machines are fed, and they're cold.
Exactly, they're not
right?
Which
they're cold. Now,
maybe
someday
good.
someone's going to give them a heart, right? And watch out, right?
What Will Smith say? Lights and clockwork on that movie I, Robot. That's exactly what it reminded me of just now.
I think the thing to recognize is it will continue to grow. It's got a place. People smarter than I am are going to figure out where that.
So
place
you
sits.
think it's just not mature enough to really? Do you think it'll get there? I guess maybe is the question.
Yeah. So the maturity, the maturity plays in multiple directions. I guess is the way I want to answer that. One, in the technology itself, right? We've got AI that's kind of exploded in all different things. I can make a video of us talking here, and I'm sure you guys have seen the videos out there where the presidents are
The fakes,
You got
Deepfake,
you got Biden, you got Obama, and you got Trump all in a room, and they're telling these stupid dad jokes, right? Right. So
that may have happened. We don't know.
You never know. I mean,
that
it
might
could be a
real.
real thing. It looks real, right?
Yeah.
But so I think there's the maturity in the technology, right? But there's also maturity in the industry and maturity in the practices. Healthcare's got a broad spectrum of just because you walk into one provider's practice, you might walk into Advent Health and you're seeing state of the art of this or that, right? But yet you go down the street to St. Luke's and it's not quite the same. Right? They don't have maybe some of the same technology, right? And it's literally just the different scales of where we're at. So I think the maturity goes in multiple directions, right? Have you guys been to a restaurant yet where you have this robot come up to bring you your food?
I have not.
No.
So the bot comes out. The first time the bot came out, the bot, for the most part, just say, "Hey, how you doing? Your appetizers, whatever." And then the waitress comes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the bot takes the appetizers, but then the waitress takes the orders and the rest of the order and everything else. But then the bot brought all the food out.
The bot talks?
Well, Fritz has been doing that for years with their railroad car up on the ceiling.
Yeah,
Isn't that the same
You know what I
thing?
mean? Kind of right. Kind of serves in the same way.
early AI.
Whereas
That's
there's
early
this
robot.
restaurant up by the airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks the same.
Yeah.
Looks like the same restaurant, but they use it differently.
Yeah.
Right? It literally brings the food out, but then it stops, never even gets near your table. And the waitress goes over there and she looks at the screen, she does something on the screen, and then certain trays will move forward, and then she pulls the food off of that and walks over to you and hands it down to you. But she actually never leaves you because the bot's going back to the kitchen and coming back and back to the kitchen, coming back, So it's different levels of sophistication. And so that's my point, right? It's that we have to evolve. Maturity goes in multiple directions. Do I think it has a place in the world? And do I think it has a place within healthcare? Absolutely it does, and it will advance healthcare for us. It's going to take time and
It seems like the voice bots they're advancing pretty quickly now, where you can have a whole conversation with a bot on the phone and not even know
Like
it's
they're
a
doing
bot
that.
bot.
There's a software out there for sales now where you can set up these call scripts, and it'll, it's variable. They'll choose to say certain things based on your responses, but you can tell, even though it's sounding a lot better, you can still tell that there's a delay. It's a little bit off.
It's to the point.
I just don't think it's there yet. But you're absolutely right. I think
It's to the point now that I'm so in tune with it, and I've read so many stories about it and seen. I got a call from somebody that I swore was a bot. Like it was a voice that almost sounded a little robotic, and I was having to test them.
that was
sure.
Nathan, Don. That's it.
So
He's always robotic.
I've had it where I've talked with a bot, and I figured out it was a bot because the sound loop in the background to make it sound like a call center was consistently the same.
And that's what you
question
noticed. That's
going on in
interesting.
the background, right?
But-
The same comment was being made, and then every once in a while, the bot would say, "Oh, let me check in the system," and then you're,
That fake typing. I hate that fake
I'm
typing.
like, all right, we're dealing with a bot. But this was, this was early versions of the bots, where I think they've gotten more sophisticated now.
I felt bad because the person I'm talking about really wasn't a bot. And then I had, but it took me like a minute and a half, 2 minutes to figure it out. And then I went, oh, this person's real. Well, I had to say something to make him laugh. And then he, laughed and said something in response. And I went, okay, well, maybe the bot's not going to laugh.
It's really ridiculous.
Oh,
when you
no,
have to
the
start
bot will laugh.
testing
It knows how to laugh.
Yeah. Have you guys done much in the way of telemedicine or remote sort of anything like that?
For us in our situations, because of the conditions and the infusions that we're doing, it isn't something that we typically would do. Now, we have ventured and we are playing with the concept of telemonitoring.
Oh, okay.
And in some cases, we use
You guys use a lot of IoT for that sort of thing then?
no, ours is very basic and rudimentary, where we allow basically just through an online call, a video call, for a nurse to maybe do an immediate assessment of a patient before maybe dispatching someone to the home.
Gotcha.
In some situations for certain disease states and stuff, we may look at things like, is there a way to do a quick assessment so we can make a determination, is this a 911 call or is this actually just dispatch somebody to the home and they'll be fine or something like that.
Gotcha.
In many cases, we advise our patients, if in doubt, 911, right? For their situations. And this is in between our point of care delivery that we do. When we're delivering, our resources stay in the home with the patient.
I wonder what kind of rules are around that. Do you guys have to record those and somehow, do you guys have to do anything special with anything like that? Like anything with storing, insurance purposes or
Not
storing
necessarily
that
insurance
data
purposes and stuff, but we do. I track everything.
Okay.
And I record everything.
And I imagine whatever on those, usually those video calls are encrypted anyway. So
Yeah.
talking about that sort of thing is not a huge deal.
Yeah, well, and we run all in HIPAA compliant environments, and everything is encrypted.
Okay.
And our pipes are all encrypted. I mean, it's
Gotcha.
I try to keep a Fort Knox up and running.